I'm going to tell you something today that will sound absolutely mad. There is a secret price that comes with awakening, and it has to do with love. Not the kind of love that fills the airwaves and breaks hearts, but something much older, much quieter, and far more dangerous. Every truly awakened being carries a certain burden, invisible to the world, yet heavy enough to make them almost untouchable. What I'm about to reveal changes everything you think you know about enlightenment, because it exposes the cost of seeing things as they truly are. Let's begin with what we mean when we say someone is in love. What's really happening there? When two people fall in love, they're not just meeting each other, they're meeting their own projections reflected back to them. It's an ancient dance, a ritual of mutual hypnosis, so subtle and enchanting that we call it romance. Each person becomes both actor and audience, crafting a performance they hope will be believed. They reveal the polished parts, the highlights, the mystery, the beauty, while quietly hiding the chaos, the fears, the small cruelties, the insecurities, and the other does the same. Two illusions gently bowing to one another, each saying, "I see you," without realizing they're looking at their own reflection wearing another face. This isn't wrong, it's necessary. The game works because it must. The human heart craves stories, structure, the illusion of knowing. Without the story, the passion dissolves too quickly, like mist in the sun. So we build the story together. You're the one, you complete me. I was lost until I found you. And for a while, it feels true, because we're drunk on the fantasy of connection. But awakening, true awakening, is like sobering up in the middle of that dream. You suddenly see the strings on the puppets, the mirrors behind the magic, and everything begins to unravel. You see your own act first. You notice the subtle ways you adjust yourself to be liked, to be wanted, to be seen as special. The tone of voice, the small lies of omission, the carefully timed pauses, all designed to maintain the illusion of being someone worth loving. You catch yourself doing it, and in that instant, the whole performance feels absurd, because you know it's not real, it's choreography. And then, with time, you start to see through everyone else's performance too. You see the fear behind their charm, the hunger behind their kindness, the loneliness behind their words. You stand before another human being, and suddenly there's nothing left to hide behind. No masks, no rehearsed lines, no dreams of future redemption, just this naked awareness looking into itself through different eyes. That kind of transparency is terrifying. It doesn't fit into the old game. When you stop pretending, when you no longer offer people the illusion of who you think you should be, they don't know what to do with you. You become impossible to categorize, impossible to pin down, like a cloud refusing to take shape. People don't fall in love with clouds. They fall in love with shapes, with names, with predictable patterns. They want someone they can hold on to, define, and fit into their life story. But the awakened being has no story. They are the pause between stories, the silence between words, the blank page on which all tales are written. So when someone meets you after you've awakened, they ask, "Who are you? What do you do? Where are you going?" And you realize that to answer honestly would sound insane, because the truth is you're nobody. You're not going anywhere. You're just this moment happening to itself. But try saying that at a dinner table and watch how fast the conversation moves on. Because most people aren't looking for truth. They're looking for a story they can believe in. They want to date a character, not the consciousness that sees through the play. And this is where the paradox begins. Awakening doesn't make you incapable of love. It makes you incapable of the usual kind of love, the transactional, possessive, story-driven kind that thrives on tension and need. You can no longer say, "I need you," because you've seen through the I and the you. You can't pretend that another person can fill a hole that never existed. You can't cling to someone when you've realized there's nowhere to fall. And yet, paradoxically, love remains. But it's no longer about getting, it's about being. It's no longer a hunger, it's a radiance. Imagine the sun choosing where to shine. Absurd, isn't it? The sun shines because shining is its nature. The awakened one loves in the same way. Love flows through them effortlessly, not because of who stands before them, but simply because love is what they are. But that kind of love frightens people. It can't be owned, it can't be bargained with, and it doesn't promise forever. It offers only now, unconditional, unrepeatable, eternal now. And so people move away. They call you detached, distant, strange. They say, "You don't feel enough. not realizing that you feel everything at once. You've become too vast for their need, too quiet for their noise, too still for their chase. You're no longer a wave seeking another wave. You're the ocean remembering itself. And the ocean, my friend, cannot be possessed. That's the secret nobody tells you before awakening. You don't just lose illusions, you lose the ability to live comfortably among those who still need them. You step out of the play, and though the stage remains, you can't quite get back into costume. You can love everyone, but you belong to no one. You become like light, touching everything, but held by nothing. And that is both the blessing and the price of seeing clearly. Because once you've seen the truth, you can't go back to pretending the shadows are real. There comes a point after awakening when the silence becomes deafening. Not the outer silence, the birds still sing, the traffic still hums, but the inner silence, the place where the old voice used to whisper, "What if?" and "What next?" Suddenly, it's gone. You wake up and realize the commentary that ran your entire life has fallen quiet. It's peaceful, yes, but also disorienting. You used to be a character with goals and problems. Now you're a vast field in which those things appear and dissolve. You used to chase meaning. Now meaning simply is. And yet to everyone around you, you look the same. They still see the familiar shape of your face, still ask the same questions, still expect the same responses. They don't see that something fundamental has died inside you, the constant need to become something else. At first, you try to explain it. You say things like, "I realized I'm not my thoughts," or "I feel connected to everything." But words betray the experience. They make it smaller, ordinary, almost trite. People nod politely, and you see in their eyes that they haven't understood. How could they? They're still living inside the story. And stories don't like silence, they fear it. So, eventually you stop talking about it. You move through the world like someone who's woken up in the middle of a dream but keeps playing along, smiling gently, answering questions, laughing at the right moments, though you know none of it is as it seems. That's when the loneliness begins to creep in, not the loneliness of absence, but of presence. You feel everything all the time. Every joy, every sorrow, every heartbeat of the world vibrates through you. You walk down a crowded street and sense the quiet ache beneath each passing face. The student worrying about the future, the mother tired from loving too much, the old man pretending not to be afraid of dying. You see through them as if their stories were made of glass. And the strangest part is you love them for it, all of them, unconditionally, but they can't quite meet you there. They're too busy defending their stories, protecting their fragile identities from the vastness you represent. This is the paradox of awakening. The more deeply you love, the fewer people can receive it. They mistake your stillness for indifference, your freedom for detachment. They say you're distant, but you're closer than ever. So close you've dissolved the boundaries they still cling to. It's like trying to hug sunlight. It touches everything, but you can't grab hold of it. Sometimes, when you meet someone who stirs an echo of that old passion, you feel the temptation to step back into the game, to play at being someone again, to wear the mask for just a moment so you can feel that delicious illusion of two souls meeting. But it doesn't last. You can't unknow the truth. You can't unsee the invisible thread connecting every being to every other. You can't pretend to be lost when you've already found home. So you let people go softly. You love them without needing them to stay. You listen to their fears without trying to fix them. You walk beside them knowing that every encounter is temporary, every connection a wave rising and falling in the ocean that you are. There's a sweetness in that acceptance, a tenderness that's deeper than any romance, because you no longer love for something. You love from something, from the endless well of being that never runs dry. You begin to notice the subtle beauty in the smallest moments, a stranger's laughter echoing in a cafe, the way sunlight touches a leaf, the rhythm of your own breathing. Everything becomes sacred, not because it lasts, but because it doesn't. The impermanence itself becomes the proof of divinity. You stop seeking permanence in people, in love, in identity, because you realize that change is the only constant that never betrays you. And yet, even in this quiet understanding, there's grief. The grief of watching the world chase illusions you can no longer participate in. The grief of realizing that you can no longer be saved by the things that once comforted you. It's not a sad grief. It's more like standing at the edge of the ocean watching a sunset. Beautiful, inevitable, beyond control. You weep not because something is wrong, but because everything is so perfectly right. In the end, Awakening is not about gaining wisdom or peace. It's about losing the ability to lie to yourself. It's about standing naked before existence and saying, this is it. This is all there ever was. You no longer look for meaning in the stars because you've realized you are the sky itself. And that realization changes everything. How you love, how you suffer, how you live, and how you die. It turns every moment into eternity, every breath into a quiet prayer. And though the world may never understand it, that's all right. You didn't wake up to be understood. You woke up to be. There's a peculiar thing that happens after awakening, a quiet rearrangement of perception that no one prepares you for. The world doesn't disappear. It becomes unbearably clear. Everything ordinary begins to shimmer with a kind of sacred absurdity. You still brush your teeth, you still pay your bills, you still get hungry, but behind each action, there's an awareness watching, amused by the simplicity of it all. You find yourself smiling at things that used to irritate you, like someone cutting you off in traffic or a stranger's rude comment. It's not because you've become indifferent, but because you finally see the whole play unfolding, and it's impossible to take it personally when you know it's all one great movement playing every role at once. Before, you used to believe in control. You thought your choices shaped your destiny, your willpower defined your success. But now, you watch decisions arise like waves, spontaneous, effortless, inevitable. You don't know where they come from, and you don't need to. You've seen the futility of claiming ownership over the tide. The mind still whispers, I decided this, but you know it's just narrating what's already happened. You realize that life has always been happening on its own, that what you called yourself was merely a story superimposed on something far vaster. It's a strange relief, this letting go of authorship. At first, it feels disorienting, almost frightening, because the illusion of control was comforting. But then, slowly, it becomes freedom. You move through the world like a leaf floating down a river, sometimes in sunlight, sometimes in shadow, always moving, never lost. You stop fighting the current. You start trusting it. And yet, this trust isn't passive. It's not resignation or laziness. It's participation without resistance. You act because action happens through you. You speak because words appear in your mouth. You love because love moves you like the wind moves the branches. There's no calculation, no moral scoreboard, no anxious planning. Life becomes improvisation. You are the dancer, and the dance, the musician, and the song. From the outside, it might look as though nothing has changed. You still laugh, work, make mistakes, fall ill, get tired. But inwardly, the ground beneath you has dissolved. There's no one left to hold on to experience, no one to claim it as mine. Joy and sorrow still come and go, but they pass through like weather. They no longer define the climate of your being. And here's where the deeper paradox emerges. As you dissolve, compassion deepens. The less personal everything feels, the more tender it becomes. When you look at others, you no longer see strangers. You see yourself, disguised. Their confusion is your old confusion. Their longing, your own forgotten hunger. You recognize yourself in the beggar and the billionaire alike. You see that every gesture, every failure, every triumph is the universe learning to know itself. You begin to notice how much energy people spend maintaining the fiction of me, the constant self-polishing, self-defending, self-explaining. It's exhausting. You watch it happening in conversations, in arguments, even in love. Everyone is performing, terrified that if they stop, they'll disappear. You want to tell them the truth, that the disappearance they fear is the liberation they crave. But you can't rush someone toward their own surrender. Each must arrive at it in their own time, when the dream has worn thin enough to see through. So you live gently. You stop trying to fix people. You listen instead of instructing. You give without expectation. The awakened state doesn't make you powerful. It makes you transparent. People feel something around you, though they can't explain it. They say you have a calm energy, a strange ease. What they're feeling is the absence of resistance. You're no longer pushing against life, so life flows through you without distortion. There are moments, however, when the old world tugs at you. When you see lovers arguing in the street or friends laughing loudly over dinner, a small ache stirs inside, a memory of when you still believed in the story. There was comfort in that illusion, the sweetness of drama, the urgency of wanting. But even as you feel the ache, you smile, because you know it's just nostalgia for a dream. You can't go back to sleep once you've seen the dawn. Awakening, in the end, isn't about escaping the human experience. It's about seeing it for what it truly is. A fleeting play of light and shadow on the surface of something infinite. You still feel pain, but it no longer wounds you. You still love, but it no longer binds you. You live fully, but you don't cling to life. You've become like the open sky, vast, untouched, yet allowing every cloud to pass freely through. And perhaps the greatest miracle of all is how ordinary it feels. Enlightenment isn't fireworks or angels descending. It's drinking a cup of tea and knowing the universe is tasting itself. It's hearing a child laugh and realizing it's your own joy echoing back. It's walking alone at night and feeling utterly complete. You realize then that the secret was never hidden. It was simply too obvious to notice. You were never separate. You were never broken. You were the ocean pretending to be a drop. And in the quiet recognition of that truth, life begins again. Not as a search, but as a celebration of what's always been here. There's a subtle shift that happens after awakening, something more delicate than thought and quieter than silence. It's the moment you stop trying to hold the world together. You realize it never needed your control, your endless managing, your anxious little attempts to steer it toward meaning. Life has been moving perfectly well on its own since long before you appeared, and it will continue long after you're gone. This realization is both humbling and liberating. You no longer feel like the captain of the ship. You're the ocean itself, moving effortlessly beneath every wave that rises and falls. But this freedom doesn't arrive like a thunderclap. It arrives like the slow opening of dawn. At first, it's unsettling. You notice how everything you used to believe in, goals, success, purpose, starts to lose its urgency. You don't stop acting or caring. You just stop pretending that your actions determine the ultimate outcome. You still plan, but the planning feels lighter, like drawing in sand that the tide will soon wash away. You still dream, but you no longer confuse your dreams for destiny. That's when a strange kind of peace begins to take root. Not the peace of stillness, but the peace of surrender. You understand that to live fully is to stop arguing with what is. You stop dividing the world into what you want and what you fear, what you should have been and what might still be. Reality becomes a single movement, whole and indivisible. Every moment contains its own perfection, even the painful ones, especially the painful ones. It's not that suffering disappears, it transforms. Pain still comes, but it no longer feels like punishment. It becomes communication, life speaking to itself through sensation. You don't resist it anymore. You listen. A headache, a heartbreak, a loss, all of it becomes part of the same mysterious language. You stop asking, why me? And begin to hear this too. You start to notice that the more you let things pass through you, the less they linger. Emotions flow like rivers now instead of dams waiting to burst. And when you stop resisting, the world softens. You begin to see beauty everywhere, even in places you once thought ugly. The crooked tree outside your window, the wrinkles on a stranger's face, the cracks in the walls, all of them seem to whisper the same truth. Nothing needs to be fixed because nothing was ever broken. You've been conditioned to think that life must be improved, refined, optimized, but awakening reveals that it's not life that needs perfecting, it's perception. You look around and realize everyone's running somewhere, chasing security, chasing validation, chasing eternity. But you know now that the chase itself is the cage. You used to be in it too, sprinting after shadows, believing that happiness was always just one achievement away. But once you've tasted stillness, ambition loses its grip. Not because you don't care anymore, but because you finally understand that no external victory can surpass the quiet joy of being. People misunderstand this calm. They think it's apathy or detachment. They don't see that behind your eyes there's an entire cosmos dancing, that your stillness is not absence, but presence in its purest form. You still laugh, you still love, you still cry, but it's all transparent now. Nothing sticks. You've become the clear sky that holds every storm without being touched by it. Sometimes, though, the clarity hurts. You see through everything, the false urgency of society, the noise people mistake for purpose, the endless striving to be someone. You see how fear drives almost every decision, how the need for approval shapes entire lives. It's heartbreaking, not because you feel superior, but because you remember being there. You remember the ache of searching for meaning in things that could never offer it. And even now, you sometimes feel that ache like an old scar. Yet compassion grows from that memory. You no longer want to wake people up. You simply want to love them where they are. You understand that everyone is walking toward the same truth, even if they don't know it. Some are running, some are crawling, some are dancing in circles, but all are moving toward the same home. You no longer measure progress. You no longer rush anyone. You let life unfold them as gently as it unfolded you. There are moments when you find yourself staring out a window, watching the wind move through the trees, and you realize that's enough. That this small, unremarkable moment is eternity, looking at itself. The wind doesn't ask where it's going. The leaves don't ask why they fall. They move, they rest, they decay, they return. You finally understand that this is all any of us are doing, appearing, disappearing, returning, and then something remarkable happens. Gratitude, not the gratitude of having something, but the gratitude of being. Gratitude without object. You're grateful, not because life gave you what you wanted, but because life is, because you are, because somehow the mystery of existence decided to take this particular shape for this fleeting moment and call itself you. You begin to see that love, real love, isn't an emotion. It's the recognition of this miracle in everything. It's the awareness that every form, every face, every breath is the universe expressing itself, even when it looks like suffering, especially when it looks like suffering. And you smile, not the smile of triumph, but of understanding, because you see now that there was never a path, never a destination. The journey was only the unfolding of awareness, the remembering of what was always true. You were never lost. You were dreaming of being lost, so you could wake up and discover that you had always been home. There comes a point when awakening no longer feels like an experience. It becomes the quiet background of everything. You stop thinking about it, talking about it, naming it. It just is. The extraordinary becomes ordinary. And that is perhaps the most extraordinary thing of all. You move through the world as you always have, buying groceries, answering messages, meeting friends. But something invisible has shifted. The center that used to say I has dissolved. There's movement, thought, emotion, yet no one left to own any of it. Life unfolds, and you are both within it and beyond it, simultaneously actor and witness. It's in this stage that a different kind of challenge appears. Not the chaos of awakening itself, but the subtle, slow work of living without illusion in a world built on it. Society, you realize, runs on agreements. People agree on what matters, what success looks like, what's right and wrong, what should be feared or desired. You used to belong to those agreements. They gave shape to your life, but now you see them for what they are. Beautiful inventions, useful stories, necessary perhaps, but not true. You can play along when needed, but deep down you know the game, and knowing that changes everything. It's difficult at times. You find yourself surrounded by people chasing things you can no longer chase. They're striving for identity, clinging to opinions, defending beliefs as if their lives depend on them. And in a way they do, because to question those beliefs would dissolve the very self they think they are. You watch with tenderness, not judgment. You remember how real it felt when you were inside it. You remember believing that meaning lived somewhere out there just waiting to be earned or discovered. When you try to speak of what you've seen, the words fall flat. You realize there's nothing you can really explain because the truth can't be transferred, only recognized. So you grow quieter. You let your presence do the speaking. The space between your words becomes your message. People sense it sometimes. A calm beneath your sentences, a stillness that doesn't need to prove itself. Some are drawn to it, others feel uncomfortable, as if standing before a mirror they didn't ask for. You learn to stop expecting understanding. You give without demand. You love without needing to be loved back. Love, in fact, becomes something entirely new. It's no longer about affection or attraction, it's about recognition. When you look at someone, you don't see a separate being. You see yourself in another form. You see the same light refracted through a different pattern. Their joy is your joy. Their pain is your pain. This isn't poetic, it's literal. You feel it. There's no boundary left to protect you from it. And paradoxically, you don't want one. Compassion stops being a virtue and becomes the natural response of wholeness to itself. But this transparency comes with a kind of quiet sorrow. You begin to see how much suffering comes from forgetting. Not evil, not malice, just forgetfulness, the innocent mistake of taking the dream for reality. You see people fighting to be seen, to be loved, to be important, when they already are everything they seek. You see nations fighting over imaginary lines, people dividing themselves into tribes, forgetting that they share the same breath, and you can't fix it. Not because you don't care, but because you know that no one can awaken another. The seed of remembrance must open from within. So you learn the art of invisible service. You help without drawing attention. You move through the world leaving traces of kindness, too small to be noticed, but too real to fade. You plant understanding where misunderstanding grows. You listen when others only wait to speak. You hold space for the chaos of others without trying to calm it. You discover that the truest form of love has nothing to do with saving anyone. It's about allowing them to unfold exactly as they are, trusting that the same intelligence that woke you will eventually wake them too. There's a lightness in this way of living. You no longer carry the burden of needing to fix or prove or become. You stop rehearsing for a future that never comes. You inhabit each moment fully, not as a spiritual exercise, but because there's nothing else to do. Even boredom becomes beautiful, because within it there's room for everything. Occasionally you still feel the echo of the old self, the one who worried, who planned, who sought approval. It appears like a ghost in familiar situations, an argument, a disappointment, a sudden fear. But instead of pushing it away, you smile. You see it for what it is, an old habit of thought passing through the space you are. You don't fight it, you don't feed it, you just let it move. Slowly, even the ghosts grow tired of visiting, and then something soft and wordless replaces them, a steady joy that doesn't depend on circumstance. You might be standing in line at a grocery store, watching people scroll through their phones, and suddenly you feel it. The quiet miracle of being alive. The pulse of the universe humming through fluorescent lights, shopping carts, and small talk. You realize there's no such thing as an ordinary moment. Everything is sacred because everything is real. At night, you might lie awake listening to the world breathe, the distant hum of cars, the sound of your own heart. There's no separation between any of it. You could die right then, and it would be fine. Not because you want to, but because there's nothing left unfinished. Life is complete in every instant, and this is the quiet secret of the awakened life. It doesn't make you special. It makes you simple. You don't become someone greater. You become no one at all. You fade into what has always been here, and from that disappearance arises a love so vast, so effortless, that it fills the world without needing a single name. After a while, awakening begins to lose its glow. The bliss that once flooded you like sunlight starts to fade into something quieter, almost invisible. It isn't that the peace has left, it's that peace has become so natural, so woven into everything, that you no longer notice it. The extraordinary dissolves into the ordinary. Washing the dishes, hearing footsteps in a hallway, feeling the rain on your skin, each of these small, simple moments becomes the living pulse of reality. You start to understand that enlightenment was never meant to be a climax, but a return. A homecoming so subtle that only silence can recognize it. You might imagine this sounds dull, like the thrill of life has vanished, but it's the opposite. The thrill remains, it's just freed from needing a reason. There's no longer a high to chase because the whole world is quietly radiant. The mind, which once demanded constant stimulation, starts to rest. It stops trying to turn everything into a problem to solve or a ladder to climb. It simply watches. The leaf falling, the laughter of strangers, the hum of an airplane. Every detail is complete in itself, asking nothing from you. Yet this very simplicity can unsettle others. The awakened person seems calm to the point of indifference, too unbothered, too accepting. People mistake your quiet for detachment, not realizing that beneath it lies an intimacy so vast it can no longer be expressed through drama. You love too deeply to interfere. You've learned that everything unfolds as it must, including suffering. You can sit beside someone in their pain without needing to fix it, because you trust the intelligence of life more than your desire to control it. There's a maturity in this kind of love, one that doesn't sparkle or announce itself. It doesn't need declarations or promises. It moves like water, soft, patient, unstoppable. You realize that real love isn't a feeling, but a way of seeing. It's the recognition that even the broken, even the lost, even the cruel are all fragments of the same totality, playing their part in the same cosmic rhythm. You begin to see the world less as a collection of individuals and more as a single organism dreaming itself into countless forms. This vision changes how you relate to everything. You stop dividing experiences into good and bad. The rain that once ruined your plans now feels like music. The delay, the loss, the disappointment, each becomes another shade of the same beauty. It's not that you've become numb, it's that resistance has dissolved. You no longer stand apart from life, trying to make it fit your image of how it should be. You move with it, you dance, even when the music changes unexpectedly. Sometimes in this state you remember what it was like before, the striving, the fear, the constant reaching for meaning. You look back at that version of yourself with tenderness, like watching an old film of a child chasing fireflies. You understand why you searched, why you suffered. Every confusion, every heartbreak, every desperate grasping was part of the unfolding. You had to believe you were separate in order to discover that you never were. Without the dream, awakening would have no contrast. You can't wake up without first being asleep. And so, rather than rejecting the past, you bless it. You bless every failure, every wrong turn, every moment of despair. They were all doorways. You stop wishing that anything had been different. Even your mistakes become sacred because they carried you here. Still, there's a kind of quiet loneliness that lingers. Not the loneliness of being unloved, but the loneliness of being unseen. Few people can meet you in this space. Conversations often skim the surface, trapped in the noise of the world. You smile and listen, knowing that words will never bridge the distance between dreaming and waking. You might try to speak from truth, but it sounds strange, almost alien. People look at you with polite confusion, searching for something to hold on to, but there's nothing left to give them except presence. That's when you realize the true purpose of awakening isn't to separate from the world. It's to return to it, not as someone above or beyond, but as the world itself. You begin to live with quiet devotion to the ordinary. You cook with care, walk slowly, listen deeply. Every gesture becomes a prayer, not to any god, but to existence itself. You no longer seek meaning, you embody it. And life, sensing your surrender, begins to open in unexpected ways. Opportunities come not because you chase them, but because you've stopped blocking them. Relationships deepen not because you demand love, but because you radiate it. Work becomes effortless because you no longer work for approval or success. You simply do what's in front of you with total attention. The simplest tasks, folding laundry, answering an email, sweeping a floor, become sacred rituals. You finally understand that awakening isn't the end of human life. It's the beginning of truly living it. Every once in a while, an old wave of emotions still rises. Anger, fear, desire, and for a brief moment, it feels like the old self returning. But instead of panicking, you watch. You let it move through you like wind through an open window. You know it's just life expressing itself in yet another form. Nothing to fight, nothing to fix. The storm passes and the sky remains. In that stillness, you begin to sense something deeper than peace, an intimacy with existence that has no name. You can't describe it because it's not something you feel. It's what you are. It's the quiet awareness behind every sound, the listener behind every thought. It's what was here before you were born and what will remain long after you die. You finally understand. Awakening was never about becoming something more. It was about becoming less attached, less certain, less separate, until there was nothing left between you and life itself. And in that nothingness, you discover everything. There's a point, somewhere far beyond the idea of seeking, when the awakened person begins to feel an odd, almost invisible transformation, a quiet shift from realization to embodiment. It's one thing to awaken and see the illusion of separation dissolve. It's another to live from that seeing, to let it seep into every corner of daily existence, until even the smallest gesture carries the weight of the infinite. Awakening is the spark. Embodiment is the fire that slowly consumes everything false that remains. At first you might think that realization is enough, that knowing you are not the mind, not the story, not the self, is the end of the road. But soon you discover that life has a way of testing that understanding. The old patterns, the habits, the fears, they still arise. They don't vanish overnight. You may know that you are not your anger, and yet anger appears raw and sudden. You may see that you are not your desires, but desire still moves through you, insistent and wild. The difference now is that you no longer mistake them for you. They become like weather passing through the open sky of awareness. You watch them come and you watch them go, and in that watching, they lose their power. But this watching isn't detached, it's tender, intimate. You begin to see that even your most primitive impulses are part of the same sacred movement. They too belong. Nothing is exiled anymore. Not fear, not grief, not longing. You stop editing your humanity in order to appear enlightened. You let yourself be fully human because you finally understand that being human was never the problem. The problem was believing you had to transcend it. So you live differently now, not by trying to be spiritual, but by allowing everything to be what it is. You eat when you're hungry, sleep when you're tired, cry when you're sad. Simplicity returns. Life becomes strangely effortless, not because it's free of challenges, but because you no longer create resistance around them. The flow of existence moves through you like wind through open branches, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, but always free. And yet, there's a new kind of responsibility that comes with this freedom. Not the responsibility of moral obligation, but the responsibility of awareness. When you see clearly, you can no longer pretend ignorance. Every action becomes a reflection of truth or distortion. You feel when your words carry harmony, and you feel when they cause division. You sense when your choices serve love, and when they feed fear. You are no longer guided by rules or dogma, but by an inner intelligence so precise it doesn't need explanation. You become incapable of betrayal, not because you fear punishment, but because you see too clearly the interconnectedness of all things. Hurting another becomes indistinguishable from hurting yourself. And with that seeing comes humility. You realize how easy it is to fall into the trap of spiritual identity, to start believing that awakening makes you special, that awareness belongs to you. But awareness is the opposite of ownership. The moment you try to possess it, it slips through your fingers. You begin to notice how subtle ego can be, how it disguises itself as wisdom, as insight, as compassion. It whispers, "I am awakened," and immediately you know you've lost the essence. True realization leaves no trace of I. It's not a state you can hold. It's the absence of the one who tries to hold it. Over time, you become comfortable living without definition. People ask who you are, what you believe, what you want, and you can't answer. Not because you're confused, but because identity no longer feels relevant. You are not one thing anymore. You're whatever life is doing right now. Some days that's laughter, some days it's silence, some days it's cleaning the kitchen or sitting in traffic. There's no hierarchy between them. You've stopped grading existence. The sacred hides everywhere, even in the mundane. There's a beauty in this ordinariness that words can't touch. You find it in the quiet between conversations, in the pause before a breath, in the way sunlight spills across a floor you haven't swept yet. Everything feels perfectly placed, even the things that used to seem wrong. You realize that perfection was never about smoothness or control. It was about total inclusion. Nothing is left out of the whole. Sometimes, in still moments, you look around and see the same world you once thought you knew. The same faces, buildings, streets, but it all feels new, as if creation is happening in real time. The edges between things blur. The air itself feels alive, shimmering with an invisible awareness. You can't find where you end and the world begins. Even pain has a strange beauty to it now, because it reminds you that to feel anything at all is a miracle. This shift also changes how you relate to others. You stop trying to convince anyone of anything. The need to be understood evaporates. You begin to speak only when there's something true to say, and silence feels like enough most of the time. You start noticing the spaces between words, the pauses in conversation where real connection happens. Presence becomes the new language, and even when you say nothing, people feel you completely. And gradually the distinction between spiritual and ordinary life collapses. There's no longer a line between meditation and movement, between the sacred and the profane. Everything becomes meditation. Every sound is a mantra. Every heartbeat is a prayer. The divine is not something you visit anymore. It's the ground beneath every step. You begin to sense that what you are has never been born and will never die. You see death not as an ending, but as a continuation of the same movement that has always been. You stop fearing the unknown, because you realize there was never anything known to begin with, only this endless unfolding, this infinite now. And in that understanding, something final and quiet settles inside you. You don't call it enlightenment or peace or love, though it contains all three. You just live. You live with an ease that needs no witness, with a joy that asks for nothing in return. You live as the sky lives, open, clear, allowing clouds to come and go, knowing they were never separate from the blue. That is the real depth of awakening, not an escape from the world, but a complete return to it. A return so total that you can no longer find the line between you and life itself. Everything breathes together, endlessly, without beginning or end. And you at last are simply here, utterly ordinary, quietly infinite. There comes a time, long after awakening has settled in, when life begins to feel like a slow return to the heart. At first, the path was all about seeing through illusion, through identity, through all the stories that made you believe you were separate. But sight alone is not enough. Eventually, the awakening that began in the mind must descend into the body, into the pulse, into the simple act of breathing. You begin to realize that understanding the truth and living the truth are not the same thing. The first liberates you from the dream. The second teaches you how to walk inside it with grace. This descent into embodiment is subtler and more demanding than the revelation that preceded it. Seeing that you are not the mind is easy compared to allowing that realization to touch every instinct, every wound, every corner of your humanity. The mind can awaken in an instant. The body takes its time. It remembers everything. The fear, the tension, the centuries of survival written into your bones. And awakening doesn't erase those memories. It illuminates them. It brings them into light so they can finally rest. You begin to notice how the smallest gestures of daily life still carry echoes of the old conditioning. The quick defensiveness in a conversation, the tightening in the chest when someone disagrees, the slight impatience that arises when plans change. These moments no longer define you, but they reveal where the old self still lingers. It's like cleaning a house that's already been opened to the sun. There's no darkness left, but the dust still settles in unexpected places. You move through these traces gently, without judgment, sweeping, polishing, breathing. This stage of the journey isn't dramatic or glorious. It's quiet and deeply human. It's learning to meet your own vulnerability with the same compassion you once reserved for others. It's allowing the waves of emotion to move through you without pretending to be above them. You cry more easily, laugh more freely, and sometimes feel both at once. The armor that once kept you safe becomes too heavy to wear, and you start taking it off piece by piece, even when it hurts. People often assume that awakening makes life easier, but the truth is subtler. It makes life real. You no longer have the luxury of lying to yourself. Everything false stands out in sharp relief. You can feel dishonesty in your own words, the way you feel a stone in your shoe. It simply doesn't fit anymore. You become allergic to pretense, to manipulation, to the games people play to protect their egos. And while this can be isolating at first, it also becomes a kind of purification. What remains after the lies fall away is simple, raw, honest being. The world begins to feel transparent. You see how everyone, in their own way, is just trying to find peace through love, through power, through distraction, through meaning. You can't judge them for it because you remember doing the same. You understand now that no one chooses ignorance. It's just that not everyone is ready to wake. You learn to love them as they are, to meet them exactly where they stand in their story. This love is not sentimental. It doesn't try to rescue anyone. It's more like sunlight. It warms everything it touches, but asks for nothing in return. In this space of openness, relationships change. You stop relating from need or expectation. People come and go, and you let them. The connections that stay are those rooted in truth, simple, effortless, without grasping. You no longer fall into the old rhythm of trying to be understood or trying to fix others. You just listen deeply. You hold the silence between words as if it were sacred, because it is. And something beautiful happens when you live this way. Life starts to guide you directly. Intuition replaces effort. You don't plan so much anymore. You move when it feels right, speak when the words arise, act when action calls. The mind, once your master, becomes a servant again. You find yourself in the right places at the right times without trying to control anything. Synchronicities appear not because you summoned them, but because you stopped resisting the natural flow of things. Everyday existence begins to reveal its own quiet intelligence. You might be standing at a bus stop, feeling the breeze on your face, and realize that the entire universe is breathing with you. You might be in the middle of a mundane task, folding laundry, washing dishes, and suddenly sense the rhythm of life pulsing through your hands. The boundaries between sacred and ordinary dissolve completely. The temple is everywhere now, in the sound of footsteps, in the flicker of a streetlight, in the silence before sleep. There's a sweetness in this simplicity, a humility that wasn't there before. You no longer care about being awakened or enlightened or recognized. Those words feel too small for something so vast. You understand that the moment you claim awakening, you've lost it. Awareness can't belong to anyone. It is everyone. So you let go of the labels, the ideas, the stories. You become anonymous in the deepest sense, not hidden, but transparent. You move through the world unseen, not because no one notices you, but because there's no longer a you to be noticed. And yet this invisibility is luminous. People feel it, even if they can't explain it. They sense a quiet presence around you, something that asks for nothing, yet gives everything. You don't radiate authority or wisdom. You radiate permission, the permission to be exactly what they are. The more you embody truth, the more others feel safe enough to drop their masks. That is how awakening spreads, not through preaching or teaching, but through being. Sometimes you look back at the person you once were and feel a wave of compassion, almost like remembering a dream. You see how hard you tried, how much you feared, how deeply you wanted to be loved. You don't reject that version of yourself. You bow to it. It was the seed that cracked open to make this blossoming possible. In the end, embodiment means letting love become your only teacher. Not the romantic kind that clings or seeks, but the love that is existence itself. The love that breathes you, that beats your heart, that carries you even when you forget. You realize that awakening was never about escaping the world, but about loving it so completely that you and it are no longer two. And so you live now in a kind of sacred ordinariness, where each breath is enough, each moment self-complete. You don't search anymore. You don't resist. You just live. And in that living, life itself awakens over and over again, endlessly, through you.